Hi guys, I'd like to bring you a Sitrep from the background of what's been happening in fighting men of Rhodesia. This week I received an interesting email from Daryl Watt and Andre Schippers with regard to gallantry awards in C Squadron SAS. Andre Schippers writes to Daryl Watt and says, "It is with great sadness that I have to write this report. Three recent issues have obligated me to do this. Firstly, I read the President's message in Wing Chatter. I have received a large amount of correspondence from fellow SAS soldiers expressing their concern about the injustices and unfairness of our unit's medal distribution and therefore feel that it is incumbent upon me to speak up on their behalf. Hence, my primary concern is in this report is to acknowledge that they did not receive the bravery recognition that they deserved. The imbalance of medal distribution that occurred between a few squadron leaders compared to the rest of the regiment is not only shameful and immoral, but also shows a remarkable disparity of unfairness and injustice that has never been uncovered. At the very onset, I want to make it abundantly clear that I am not discontent with my own awards and rest content therein. Rather, I want to speak for the rest of the men who experienced the injustice of our medal distribution. I worked with most of these men and am au fait with some of their combat experiences. I know that the antagonists reading this report will strongly oppose my conviction, but moral truth must prevail, and the SAS men themselves need to decide whether what I say is true or false. The BCR, or Bronze Cross of Rhodesia, SCR, and GCV, or Silver Cross and Grand Cross of Valor, were gallantry awards. According to the Rhodesian Army's own citations, this is awarded for conspicuous gallantry or valor to members of our security forces in combat. Basically, a bravery award depends on a personal act of courage confirmed by eyewitness operators. As awards, they were authenticated by operators who witnessed the bravery action of another person and testified accordingly. On the other hand, the GLM, CLM, OLM, and MLM, like Legion of Merit, Military Division, were medals awarded for distinguished service to Rhodesia military. In terms of valor, it is important to acknowledge that different military situations evoke different responses. For example, bravery can also take place in a small low-scale operation where soldiering skills and ability might be wanting, and even in a situation where minimal enemy kills have occurred. A bravery award may even be given to a soldier in a defensive situation or even in the process of a retreat when under pressure from an advancing or offensive enemy. Basically, bravery is a personal act done in a particular combat situation. In my analysis of the SCR and GCV medal citations given to SAS operators, I come to the conclusion that the medal committee made a huge category mistake. By this I mean that it mixed up the success outcome and leadership aspect with the gallantry aspect. That is, the planning and operational aspect tended to be confused with the valor aspect. The given citations continually and mistakenly associate the planning involved that led to the success of the operation and the total number of enemy killed with the recipient's personal bravery, which is not necessarily a valid or true connection. Generally, as SAS officers, we all showed leadership skills in combat on various levels. The point being is this: if the general tenor of the military operation itself forms the basis for receiving a bravery award, then many more officers, NCOs, and troopers should have received medals because the actual enemy killed was accomplished by the fighting men themselves. Let's not forget that the fighting, the killing, and the combat aggression was done by actual soldiers. I personally heard of a squadron commander saying that he received the SCR on behalf of the whole squadron. This, as we know, is not possible because a gallantry award is for a personal act of bravery in combat and never on behalf of other people. Let me try to clarify further the issue. For example, I embarked on many operations where hundreds of enemy were killed in our sweeping assault lines in camp attacks. Even though I personally led a contingent of men in the attack, it did not require any more courage on my part than it did from the men on either side of me. If my leadership was the reason for a large successful kill rate, this outcome is what was naturally expected from highly trained professional soldiers in the SAS. So, in this context, the final result or success must not be equated to my personal bravery, since it was a joint exercise that equally involved all the men. It was a corporate action. Let us use another analogy to try and exemplify the same truth. Australia hosted the Commonwealth Games. Our game administrators and planners did a wonderful job. Under their leadership, we brought in over 150 medals for the nation. Undoubtedly, the planning contribution to the national success was huge, but it was the winners of their respective sport events that stood on the podium and received the medals for their personal achievements, and not the planners and managers. Bearing in mind that the winners' achievements were both authenticated in measurable terms and testified to by the incumbent officials and attending audience. This analogy might not be the best, and admittedly a big difference exists between war and sport, yet the same principles still apply when it comes to endorsing the medal's outcome. Perhaps I should ask, to which 10 operators do the two SAS citations constantly referred to in order to help us assess which bravery actions were actually performed in each of these operations that earned the recipients their Silver Cross of Rhodesia or Grand Cross of Valor? As we already know, to earn the Grand Cross of Valor requires an extraordinary feat of valor on a unique scale. Just read the citations of some of the men in the Great Wars that received a Victoria Cross. The dictionary defines the noun valor as determination in facing great danger, especially in battle, heroic courage and bravery in battle, the key phrase being heroic courage and bravery in battle. Thus, a citation at this level must explicitly describe the heroic action embarked on by the recipient in the actual battle. Yet the SAS citations associated with granting of the Silver Crosses and Grand Cross of Valor were the recipient's overall contribution to the national war effort. While the latter itself is a very commendable contribution, we need to recognize that the reward for a successful operation is not synonymous with conspicuous acts of gallantry, but rather warrants some other form of recognition in the class of a service category award. I personally worked with many of the various squadron commanders on operations and externals. Some of them were brave leaders, at times fearless, but never once can I recall any specific bravery act that superseded that of the other soldiers that fought alongside them. What the leader did in combat, the troops did likewise, if not more. One citation reads that the recipient did a number of clandestine close-in reconnaissance operations which resulted in successful camp attacks. He played a major role in 6 base camp attacks from February 76 to March 77. It goes on to say that he led an 8-week delicate clandestine operation attacking the enemy lines of communication. Note the verbs did a number, led, played, resulted. I agree. All these actions and outcomes are highly commendable and good in themselves. But what is of significant importance here is that while the 3 key emphases mentioned in the citation are which resulted, led, and attacking the enemy lines, not a single example or act of personal bravery is mentioned in the clandestine operations. My point is that we all did many reconnaissance and clandestine missions and regularly ambushed enemy lines of communication. It's in its various forms. But this didn't necessarily involve any specific acts of bravery. Even as the citation mentioned, it might require a call for bravery, leadership, initiative, resourcefulness, endurance, etc., which was expected at an SAS level from all its operators. The question confronting us is this: who was the authoritative body or medals committee that wrote up these citations, and how and from whom did they obtain their information and feedback? The citations tend to read like that of an administrator using second-hand reports as the basis for writing the citation without describing for us, the reader, in concise empirical terms, what the recipient's actual gallantry act consisted of. Any true citation set forth in clear concrete terms should set forth in clear concrete terms that the recipient's actual heroic deed or gallantry action. It is the soldier's personal right to read about it, to consider the actual act of bravery that constituted the recipient's award. Regrettably, without this specific qualification, the standard of rewards take on a more subjective and ideological nature. it hides from the soldier who is reading the citation what similar action of bravery is required from him in order for him to obtain a similar reward in the future. Based on qualifications referred to in the SAS citations, only the 4 squadron commanders could realistically receive the SCR or GCV because of the inherent way that bravery was being described. The general tenor of the SCR and GCV citations awarded in the SAS tend to focus on aspects of leadership, performance, devotion, and contribution to overall operation of the war effort. That is, generally, the award is described and determined by the nature or outcome of an operation and not that of an actual act of bravery. Anyway, I mean, it's a long letter, and I'm not going to read all of it, but essentially, Colin Riddell wrote, it looks to me like an answer to this. In his analysis of the SCR and GCV medal citations given to SAS operators, he comes to the conclusion that the medal committee made a huge category mistake, that it mixed up the success outcome and leadership aspect with the gallantry aspect. And I must say that, you know, I tend to agree with that. When one reads about guys who won the Congressional Medal of Honor or the Victoria Cross, there are specific acts of bravery that are described and mentioned, rather than guys who are given medals for general good leadership and excellent planning. And so that was an interesting thing that I received just yesterday. This particular subject, I can remember at a luncheon in Cape Town hosted by General Leon Jacobs, I spoke to Leon about this. Well, not about this category mistake, but I spoke to him about what I felt was the paucity or lack of medals given to certain operators within the SAS, like Darrell Watt, who saw a hang of a lot of action and is respected as a legend amongst other Rhodesian soldiers. Darrell was never really recognized for his multiple acts of bravery, and Leon Jacobs said to me that, well, it all depends on your commanding officer and whether he's motivated to put your name forward, and you know how it seems as though some commanding officers were very parsimonious or stingy about putting names forward for medals or awards or recognition, whereas others were a lot more active in putting their soldiers forward for commendations. So, you know, obviously a soldier can't put his own name forward. Somebody else has to do it on his behalf, and usually that's his superior officers. And so a lot depends on. And so Leon, you know, who was chairman of the medals committee, really kind of, I suppose, said to me that the reason Darrell wasn't awarded more or given more recognition than he did receive was because of his superior officers just not putting names forward, generally speaking. So it seems as though, I mean, even Andre Skeppers, I think the Bronze Cross of Rhodesia that he received for actions that he did while he was in the RLI. I might be wrong about that, but yeah. Other news, here in the Philippines, I had a terrible thing happen to me the other day. I stood up from my desk to go to the kitchen, and my big toe caught on a wire, and I tripped and fell and managed to yank my laptop and all my hard drives came crashing down onto the floor. As a result, my laptop stopped working, which when I unplugged the hard drives and plugged them into my backup laptop, I have an old laptop that Jenny Upton bought for me. Thank you, Jenny. I found out that it was actually one of the hard drives that were damaged and not my laptop. My laptop's actually working fine, thank you, Lord. And that's what I'm using to record this video on. But my main backup hard drive, which is a 2 terabyte Toshiba drive, was Uniform Sierra, and I took it to some computer boffins who spent 3 days trying to recover the data that I had on that drive. They were unsuccessful. All my videos, all the Fighting Men of Rhodesia videos, all my travel videos, all my photographs, all my documents, all gone. And so, yeah, they eventually tried to restore the drive by formatting it, which further destroyed the data. But even that didn't manage to revive it. There were too many bad sectors. So now the drive has been sent off to the manufacturers for a warranty claim. So hopefully I will get that replaced. In the meanwhile, I've started backing up all my hard drives into the cloud, but cloud storage costs money every month. I have a lot of subscriptions that I have to pay for every month. Everything from WeTransfer to Zoom to Adobe, etc. Everything that I need for to produce these videos. So just out of interest, we have over 15,000 subscribers now in Fighting Men of Rhodesia, but fewer than 60 are supporting the channel financially. So if you'd like to throw a few pennies our way, most gratefully received. Take a trip to our Patreon page. There's a link to Patreon on the description of every single video. So when you're watching the video, underneath you'll see a subscription. Description. If you click on that description, you will find the link to Patreon or to PayPal. Patreon enables you to make a small monthly donation. It might be as little as $3 a month, or it might be as much as $100 a month. It's entirely up to you. As well as a link to PayPal if you want to just make a one-off contribution to the financial well-being of Fighting Men of Rhodesia. Anyway, guys, I just thought that whole thing about the medal was interesting and worth sharing with you. And if you enjoy to receive regular little sort of background Sitreps from me, please let me know, and I'll produce these on a more regular basis. Thank you so much for your support. Much appreciated. God bless. Bye.